Sofia Martinez had danced through missile fire over the Black Sea at altitudes that officially didn't exist. But nothing could have prepared her for the wall of laughter that greeted her at Thunderbolt Air Training Academy that scorching Tuesday morning in October. Her worn combat boots, regulation issue but bearing scars from operations that never appeared in any logbook, clicked against the pristine concrete as she walked toward the formation of cadets, lined up for morning briefing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly beyond the base perimeter, heat waves already dancing across the tarmac despite the early hour. Sofia's personnel file deliberately thin and carefully constructed listed her as a transfer from a civilian flight program in Montana. What it didn't mention were the 3 Purple Hearts locked away in a safety deposit box under a name that officially belonged to a dead woman. "Look what the wind blew in," muttered Cadet Derek Thompson from the second row, his Texas drawl carrying just loud enough for others to hear. At 24, Derek was older than most cadets, a former college football player whose daddy owned half the oil wells in Houston. He'd been flying since he was 16 and never let anyone forget it. Another diversity admission trying to play pilot. Sofia kept her eyes forward, her olive flight suit perfectly pressed despite having been up since 0400 preparing for this moment. She'd learned long ago that the first impression often determined whether you'd be accepted or targeted. Better to appear competent but not threatening, skilled but not superior. The art of strategic mediocrity had kept her alive in places where excellence could get you killed. $20 says she washes out before Thanksgiving, Derek continued, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced real consequences. His buddy, Cadet Marcus Webb, a lanky former Navy mechanic with careful eyes, nodded. "In agreement, you're on," Marcus whispered back. "Though I give her until the first real aircraft. Simulators are one thing, actual flight time separates the pretenders from the pilots." The term pretender hit Sofia like a physical blow, though. Her expression never changed. She'd heard variations of it before, in briefing rooms where her presence was questioned, in cockpits where her abilities were doubted right up until the moment she saved everyone's lives. The assumption stung because it was both completely wrong and impossible to disprove with words. Captain Williams stood at the front of the formation, clipboard in hand, aviators reflecting the harsh desert sun. He was everything central casting would order for a flight instructor. Square jaw, steel gray hair, voice that could cut through jet engine noise. When he called roll, her name came last. "Martinez, Sofia. Present, sir." He paused, studying her, with the expression of someone examining a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. "You're bunking in Delta Wing, Rack 18. Try to keep up with the program." The dismissal in his tone was subtle but unmistakable. Around her, other cadets received briefing packets, schedule adjustments, words of encouragement. She got directions to a bed and a warning disguised as advice. After formation dispersed, Sofia found herself walking alone toward the barracks. The other cadets moved in clusters, already forming the bonds that would either support or break them during the grueling months ahead. She'd seen it before in every unit she'd ever joined, the natural segregation between insiders and outsiders, the protective circles that formed around shared backgrounds and common experiences. Her assigned rack was in the far corner near a window that offered a view of the maintenance hangars, perfect for someone meant to be overlooked. As she unpacked her sparse belongings, regulation uniforms, a few carefully chosen personal items, and a small black journal wrapped in cloth, the conversation from nearby bunks continued as if she weren't there. "I heard she doesn't even have a college degree," Derek was saying, his voice carrying the particular satisfaction of someone sharing gossip. "Just some community college credits and a recommendation letter from God knows where. Maybe she's one of those military brats," suggested Lisa Park, a former Air National Guard mechanic with calloused hands and intelligent eyes. You know, grew up on bases, thinks she knows everything about planes because Daddy let her sit in a cockpit once. Sofia opened her journal to a page covered in neat handwriting, frequencies, call signs, and technical specifications that would have raised eyebrows if anyone had seen them. She closed it quickly and slid it into her locker behind her spare uniforms. Some knowledge was too dangerous to display, even accidentally. That evening in the mess hall, she sat alone at a corner table, methodically eating regulation meatloaf, while listening to conversations flow around her like water around a stone. The other cadets discussed everything from flight theory to weekend plans, but the energy shifted whenever someone noticed her listening. She was used to being underestimated. It had been an asset in her previous life. What bothered her was the casual cruelty of it, the way Derek and his crew talked about her like she was a training obstacle rather than a person. They'd nicknamed her Paper Wings within hours of her arrival, and the name stuck like aviation fuel on skin. The implication was clear. She looked like a pilot on paper, but would crumble under real pressure. "Hey, Paper Wings," Derek called out as she was clearing her tray. "You ever actually been in a cockpit, or is this all going to be new for you?" The mess hall quieted. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward her, waiting for a reaction that would either confirm their assumptions or give them new ammunition. Sofia met Derek's gaze steadily, her voice calm and even. "I'll manage." She walked away before he could respond, but his laughter followed her into the hallway, echoing off the institutional walls like the ghost of every doubt she'd ever faced. Later, lying in her narrow bunk and staring at the ceiling, she listened to the soft sounds of the base settling into night routine. Somewhere in the distance, a training flight was taking off, engines climbing toward stars she couldn't see through the small window. Her fingers found the journal again, pages filled with information that officially didn't exist, flight patterns over war zones, technical specifications for aircraft that weren't in any manual, mission reports from operations that had never happened. Tomorrow would bring her first simulator session, her first chance to prove she belonged here. But proving anything to people who'd already made up their minds was like trying to fly in a vacuum, technically possible, but requiring equipment most people didn't know existed. She'd been underestimated before. Sometimes that had been an advantage, allowing her to operate below the radar while more obvious threats drew attention. Other times it had nearly gotten people killed when assumptions about her capabilities led to poor tactical decisions. As sleep finally took her, Sofia's last conscious thought was of a different desert, a different night, and the sound of engines that didn't appear on any official maintenance log. Tomorrow would reveal whether Thunderbolt Academy was ready for what she really was, or if she'd have to keep pretending to be what they expected. Either way, she wouldn't let them break her. She'd survived worse than cruel nicknames and knowing looks. The question was whether they could survive the truth about who they'd really invited into their pristine training program. The journal slipped from her fingers as she drifted off, falling open to a page marked with a single word written in red ink: Phoenix. The simulator bay at 0500 hours felt like a cathedral of technology. Rows of enclosed cockpit replicas humming with electronics, their screens casting blue shadows across Captain Williams' weathered face. Sofia arrived 15 minutes early, a habit that had kept her alive in places that didn't officially exist on any map. "Martinez," Williams' voice cut through the mechanical whispers. "You're in Simulator 12. Basic flight controls, no weapon systems." He handed her a checklist without looking at her. "Try not to crash on your first day." Derek Townsend was already strapped into Simulator 8, his confident voice carrying across the bay as he bantered with the tech crew. "This old bird's got nothing on the stick and rudder training I grew up with. Been flying Cessnas since I could reach the pedals." Sofia slipped into her assigned simulator without comment. The interior was cramped but familiar, more familiar than it should have been for someone with her paper-thin official flight record. Her hands found the controls automatically, muscle memory guiding her through systems checks that weren't listed on any cadet curriculum. All simulators prepare for basic formation flight exercise, Williams announced through the intercom. Weather conditions: clear skies, moderate crosswind. Don't make me regret letting you near expensive equipment. The exercise was supposed to be simple. Take off, maintain formation with other aircraft, execute basic maneuvers, land safely. Standard stuff for week 1. Sofia powered up her systems, noting details the manual didn't mention: the slight delay in the artificial horizon, the way the throttle response lagged by exactly 40 milliseconds, the odd harmonic in the engine sound that suggested this particular simulator had been modified with more advanced physics than the others. "This is Cadet Thompson, ready for takeoff," Derek's voice crackled through the radio. "Let's show the new blood how it's done." "Maintain radio discipline, Thompson," Williams snapped, but there was amusement in his voice. Sofia checked her instruments one final time, then keyed her mic. "Simulator 12 ready." The digital runway stretched ahead, heat shimmer effects adding realism to the simulation. She pushed the throttle forward smoothly, feeling the simulated aircraft respond. Liftoff was clean, climb angle perfect. Around her, she could hear other cadets struggling with basic coordination, overcorrecting, fighting the controls, letting nerves override training. "Form up on heading 270, came the instruction. Sofia banked left, settling into position, behind and slightly to the right of Derek's aircraft. Through her simulated canopy, she could see his digital plane wobbling as he tried to maintain steady flight while looking around for her. "Where's Paper Wings?" Derek's voice came through clearly. "Did she stall out already?" "Maintain formation discipline," Williams warned. But Sofia caught something else in his tone: curiosity. She glanced at her tactical display and realized she was flying in Derek's blind spot, a position that required precision most cadets took months to master. Without thinking, she'd instinctively chosen the most tactically advantageous position while maintaining perfect formation parameters. "I'm here," she said simply. Pulling alongside him, Derek's head whipped around in his simulator, and she could imagine his surprise at finding her maintaining perfect position while he struggled to keep his aircraft stable. The formation exercise continued for 30 minutes: basic turns, altitude changes, approach patterns. Sofia flew like the aircraft was an extension of her nervous system, making corrections before the simulation could drift, anticipating turbulence that wasn't in the program parameters. Beside her, Derek grew increasingly agitated as his own performance seemed clumsy by comparison. "Okay, final approach," Williams announced. "Landing pattern Alpha. Watch your spacing." This was where most cadets struggled. Transitioning from formation flight to individual landings required timing, patience, and spatial awareness that took practice to develop. Sofia waited for Derek to begin his approach, then followed at the correct interval. Derek came in too steep, corrected too late, bounced twice before settling onto the digital runway with a jarring thud that would have blown tires on a real aircraft. The simulator marked his landing as acceptable with cautions. Sofia's approach was textbook: perfect glide, slope smooth, airspeed steady, touchdown so gentle the simulation barely registered impact. The computer marked it simply as excellent. When the exercise ended and canopies raised, Sofia found herself surrounded by curious stares. The other cadets climbed out of their simulators comparing experiences, but conversations died when they looked her way. Derek approached, his confident demeanor slightly dented. "Lucky first run, Paper Wings, but sim time isn't the same as real." "Flight hours." "No," Sofia agreed quietly, "it's not." Williams appeared at her shoulder, clipboard in hand, studying the printout of her performance metrics. His aviators reflected her image back at her, but she caught him frowning at something on the paper. "Martinez, stay behind. Everyone else, debrief in classroom B." As the other cadets filed out, their voices rising with post-flight adrenaline, Sofia remained by her simulator. Williams continued studying the printout, occasionally glancing at her with an expression she couldn't read. "These scores," he said finally, "they're unusually high for a first-timer. Is that a problem, sir?" "That depends." He folded the paper and tucked it into his clipboard. "Where exactly did you learn to fly, Martinez? And don't tell me Microsoft." "Flight simulator." Sofia met his gaze steadily. "Small airport, sir. Weekend instruction. Nothing formal." It wasn't technically a lie. Some of the most dangerous runways in the world could be described as small airports if you were creative with definitions. William studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Word of advice, Martinez. Around here, it's sometimes better to be good than to be too good. Understand?" The warning was clear, even if the reasoning wasn't. Sofia nodded. "Yes, sir." As she walked toward the classroom, she could hear Derek's voice echoing from inside. "I'm telling you, something's not right about her. Nobody flies like that on their first try. She's either been lying about her experience or what?" another voice asked. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." Sofia paused outside the door, hand on the handle. Through the small window, she could see Derek, gesturing animatedly while other cadets listened with varying degrees of interest. She recognized the look on his face. She'd seen it on the faces of investigators, suspicious officers, and people who'd made the mistake of digging too deep into backgrounds that were meant to stay buried. Derek Thompson had just declared war on her. The only question was whether he understood what he was really fighting. She opened the door and walked in, taking a seat in the back row. The conversation stopped, but the tension remained, thick as desert heat. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for her to either blend in or stand out. But tonight, she had preparations to make. Her journal contained more than flight specifications. It held contingency plans for situations exactly like this one. Derek Thompson didn't sleep that night. He sat on his bunk, laptop open, diving into every database he could access with his cadet credentials. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he typed Sofia Martinez into search engines, military databases, and social media platforms. What he found, or rather, what he didn't find, only deepened his suspicion. No Facebook profile, no Instagram account, no high school yearbook photos or college records, beyond a few community college transcripts. From Montana. It was as if Sofia Martinez had materialized from thin air 18 months ago, with just enough documentation to seem legitimate. "Still up, Thompson?" Marcus Webb rolled over in his bunk, squinting at the laptop's glow. "It's past midnight." "Something's not right about paper wings," Derek muttered, scrolling through another empty search result. "I've been flying since I was 16. My dad owns 3 airports in Texas. I know what natural talent looks like, and this isn't it." Marcus sat up, suddenly more alert. "What do you mean?" "I mean nobody, and I mean nobody flies formation like that on their first simulator session. The way she positioned herself in my blind spot, that's advanced tactical flying. The kind of stuff they teach combat pilots, not weekend warriors from Montana." Derek pulled up the official performance metrics from their simulator session. Sofia's scores weren't just good, they were exceptional in ways that suggested extensive military training. Response times, spatial awareness, tactical positioning, every metric screamed professional pilot. "Maybe she's just gifted," Marcus suggested, but his voice carried doubt. "Gifted doesn't explain this." Derek turned the laptop toward Marcus, showing a spreadsheet he'd created comparing all the cadets' first-day performance. "Look at these numbers. She outperformed cadets who have actual military flight experience. Hell, she outperformed some of the instructors on their first recorded runs. The next morning, Derek approached Lisa Park during the pre-flight briefing. Lisa had been working on aircraft longer than most of the cadets had been alive, and her opinion carried weight among the students. "Lisa, can I ask you something about Martinez?" Lisa looked up from the engine schematic she was studying. "The quiet one? What about her?" "Yesterday, I saw her examining one of the T6 trainers during lunch break. She wasn't just looking, she was inspecting specific components. Hydraulic lines, engine mounts, control linkages. Stuff that takes years of experience to know about." Lisa's expression grew thoughtful. "I noticed that too. Caught her checking the aircraft's maintenance logs afterward. Most cadets don't even know where to find those logs, much less how to read them. What do you think she was looking for?" "Hard to say, but the way she moved around that aircraft ... Lisa paused, choosing her words carefully. "She touched everything. Like someone who's intimately familiar with how planes can kill you if they're not maintained properly. That kind of paranoia comes from experience, not textbooks." Derek felt his pulse quicken. "What kind of experience?" "The kind you get when your life depends on the aircraft working perfectly, every single time." That afternoon, Derek found himself in the base library, using computers with higher-level access than his personal laptop. He ran background checks, cross-referenced military databases, and searched for any trace of Sofia Martinez in official records. What he discovered made his hands shake. There was a gap. A clean, surgical gap in her documented history from 3 years ago. Before that, scattered records, a few community college courses, a part-time job at a small airport in Montana. After that, nothing until she applied for the training program 6 months ago. Derek had seen gaps like this before. His father, Colonel James Thompson, had shown him redacted documents during a career day presentation. "See these black bars?" his father had said. "Sometimes the government has to protect information that could compromise national security. When people's lives depend on secrecy, records disappear." The thought sent chills down Derek's spine. What if Sofia Martinez wasn't just hiding her flight experience? What if she was hiding something much bigger? He picked up his phone and scrolled to his father's number. Colonel Thompson had connections throughout the Air Force, if anyone could dig deeper into Sofia's background, it would be him. "Dad? It's Derek. I need to ask you about something, hypothetically." "What kind of hypothetically?" "If someone had military flight training, but it wasn't showing up in normal databases, what would that mean?" There was a long pause. "Son, are you asking about classified programs?" Derek's mouth went dry. "Maybe. There's a cadet here who's flying. Like she has combat experience, but her records show she's basically a civilian." "Derek." His father's voice carried a warning. "Some questions are dangerous to ask. If you think you've stumbled onto something classified, the smart thing to do is walk away." "But what if she's lying about her qualifications? What if she's some kind of security risk?" "Then people with higher clearances than yours will handle it. Stay out of it, son. Trust me on this." But Derek couldn't let it go. After dinner, he cornered Marcus and Lisa in the rec room, keeping his voice low as other cadets watched television nearby. "I think Martinez might be involved in some kind of classified program," he whispered. Marcus nearly choked on his soda. "Are you serious? Look at the evidence. No verifiable background, flight skills that are way beyond what her records suggest, and now my dad is telling me to drop the investigation. Since when does the Air Force care about cadet gossip?" Lisa leaned forward, her expression serious. "Derek, if you're right about this, then you're playing with fire. People who work classified programs don't appreciate having their covers blown by curious cadets. So what are you saying? That we should just ignore it?" "I'm saying you should be very careful about what you do next. Because if Sofia Martinez is who you think she is, then investigating her background could be the last mistake you ever make. Derek stared at his friends, seeing the genuine concern in their eyes, but he'd come too far to back down now. Whatever Sofia Martinez was hiding, he was going to find out. Even if it meant risking everything he'd worked for, he just hoped he was prepared for what he might discover. That night, as the base settled into its quiet rhythm, Derek sat at his computer again, fingers hovering over the keyboard. One more search. One more database. One more attempt to uncover the truth about the woman everyone called Paper Wings. He typed her name again, this time adding search terms that made his heart race. Classified operations, missing personnel, black projects. The screen flickered, and for a moment, Derek thought he'd hit another dead end. Then a single result appeared, a fragment of a document with heavy redactions, but enough visible text to make him gasp. Operation Phoenix, pilot presumed Kia. Records sealed under national security protocols. Derek's hands trembled as he tried to click on the link, but it vanished, replaced by a security warning that made his blood run cold. Unauthorized. Access detected. This session has been logged and reported to base security. He slammed the laptop shut, his heart pounding. Tomorrow, he would have to decide whether to pursue the truth or pretend he'd never seen that fragment of information, either way. He knew there was no going back. The maintenance hangar at 2,100 hours was supposed to be empty. Derek had memorized the duty schedules, knew the guard rotations, understood the rhythm of Thunderbolt Academy's nighttime heartbeat. But as he slipped between the shadows of parked aircraft, searching for evidence that might explain Sofia's impossible abilities, he wasn't alone. "I wondered when you'd show up here." Sofia Martinez stepped out from behind an F-16 trainer, arms crossed, her expression unreadable in the dim light cast by security floods. She wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a dark jacket, but moved with the fluid precision of someone comfortable in dangerous spaces. "Just wanted to get a closer look at the aircraft," Derek said, trying to keep his voice steady. His phone felt heavy in his pocket, loaded with screenshots of the redacted documents he'd managed to capture before the security warning appeared. "Sure you did." Sofia moved closer, and Derek noticed she positioned herself between him and the hangar's main exit. "You know what's interesting about you, Thompson? You ask a lot of questions for someone who might not like the answers." Derek's pulse quickened, but he stood his ground. Maybe because the answers might explain why someone with your supposed background can outfly cadets who've been training for years. And what background is that? Community college dropout from Montana who learned to fly at weekend schools. Derek pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the screenshots. "Except that's not the whole story, is it?" Sofia's eyes narrowed. "What do you think you know? I know your documented history has a 3-year gap. I know you handle aircraft like someone with extensive military training. And I know that when I started digging into your background, I triggered security protocols that made my computer screen light up like a Christmas tree." The hangar seemed to grow quieter around them. Sofia studied Derek for a long moment, then took another step closer. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made him suddenly question whether confronting her alone had been a wise decision. "Derek, let me ask you something. Do you know what a black operation is?" The question seemed to surprise him. "What? A black operation?" "Military missions that are classified beyond top secret, conducted by personnel who officially don't exist. Operations so sensitive that acknowledging them could compromise national security or get people killed." Derek's mouth went dry. "You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to educate you." Sofia reached into her jacket and Derek tensed, but she only withdrew something wrapped in black cloth. She unwrapped it slowly, revealing a small metal object pilot's wings, but not the standard design. These were darker, more angular with markings that didn't match any insignia Derek had seen in his father's military references. 3 years ago, Sofia said, studying the wings in the fluorescent light, There was an incident over the Baltic Sea, a reconnaissance aircraft carrying sensitive intelligence went down in international waters. 2 hours later, satellite imagery showed the wreckage burning on the ocean surface. No survivors. Derek stared at the unusual wings, his mind racing. That's impossible. If there were no survivors, how do you... The pilot of that aircraft, Sofia interrupted, her voice steady as stone, was listed as killed in action. Full military honors, flag presentation to next of kin. Except sometimes the dead need to stay dead for national security reasons. You're saying you... Derek's voice cracked. I'm saying I tried to retire quietly. Tried to build a normal life. Maybe become a civilian flight instructor somewhere peaceful. She rewrapped the wings and tucked them back into her jacket. But when your country calls you back to service, when they need someone who can do things that don't exist in any training manual. She looked up at Derek, and her green eyes held depths that made him step backward. You answer the call. Derek's phone slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering on the concrete floor. You're talking about classified. I'm talking about why. You're going to forget everything you think you've discovered. Sofia's voice cut through his protest. Because some secrets aren't kept to protect the people who hold them. They're kept to protect everyone else. She moved past him toward the hangar door, then paused. Your father's Air Force connections? They stopped making inquiries about my background 2 days ago. Not because they couldn't find answers, but because they found enough to know they should stop looking. Derek stared at her, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. What are you? I'm exactly what I appear to be, Sofia said softly. Pilot trying to complete training and serve my country. The only difference is that I've already been serving it in ways you can't imagine. She turned toward the exit, then stopped again. Derek, I need you to understand something. The people who arranged for me to be here, they're not the kind of people who send strongly worded letters when their operations are compromised. If you pursue this investigation, if you make it impossible for me to complete my training quietly, there will be conversations about your future that you won't be part of. Derek's face went pale. Are you threatening me? I'm trying to protect you, Sofia said, and the exhaustion in her voice made it sound true. Because I've seen what happens to people who stumble into things they weren't supposed to know. Sometimes. Ignorance isn't weakness, Derek. Sometimes it's armor. She walked toward the hangar door, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Your investigation ends here. Delete whatever you found, forget whatever you think you know, and focus on becoming the pilot you came here to be. Trust me, you don't. Want to know what happens to people who can't follow that advice? Derek stood alone in the hangar, staring at his cracked phone screen, trying to process what had just happened. The woman he'd thought was a fraud had just revealed herself to be something far more dangerous and far more important than he'd ever imagined. As Sofia's footsteps faded into the distance, Derek realized he faced an impossible choice. Pursue the truth and risk consequences he couldn't imagine, or walk away from the biggest discovery of his life. He picked up his phone with shaking hands, staring at the screenshots that could either make his career or end it permanently. Whatever he decided in the next few hours would determine not just his future, but possibly his survival. The dead pilot known as Paper Wings had just given him a chance to live. The question was whether he was smart enough to take it. Derek Thompson made his decision at 0347 hours, staring at the ceiling of his bunk while the rest of the barracks slept. Despite Sofia's warning, despite the very real fear that had followed him back from the hangar, he couldn't let it go. If she was really a classified operative posing as a cadet, then someone in authority needed to know. The integrity of the training program, hell, national security itself might be at stake. He slipped out of bed and made his way to the communications center, using his access code to log into a secure terminal. His hands trembled as he composed. An encrypted message to his father's office at Peterson Air Force Base. Dad, Need urgent consultation on potential security issue at Thunderbolt. Cadet may have classified background. Requesting official investigation through proper channels. This is not a joke. Derek, he sent the message before he could second-guess himself, then returned to his bunk to wait for dawn and whatever consequences would follow. The response came faster than he'd expected. At 0630, during morning formation, Sergeant Chun approached him with a message slip. Cadet Thompson, report to the communication center immediately after formation. Official business. Derek felt every eye in the formation turn toward him, including Sofia's. Her expression remained neutral, but he caught something in her gaze: disappointment, maybe, or resignation. She'd given him a way out, and he hadn't taken it. The voice on the secure line belonged to someone Derek didn't recognize, crisp, professional, and carrying an authority that made his spine straighten automatically. Cadet Thompson, this is Agent Sarah Foster, Air Force Office of Special Investigations. I understand you have concerns about a fellow cadet's background. Yes, ma'am. I believe Sofia Martinez may be operating under false credentials. Her flight capabilities far exceed what her documented training should allow. There was a pause. Can you be more specific about these capabilities? Derek launched into a detailed account of Sofia's simulator performance, her technical knowledge, and the fragments of classified documents he'd discovered. With each detail, the silence on the other end of the line grew more ominous. Cadet Thompson, Agent Foster finally said, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them honestly. Have you shared this information with anyone else? Only a couple of friends. Marcus Webb and Lisa Park. They've noticed strange things about Martinez too. Another pause. I see. And have you attempted to access any classified databases or documents? During your investigation, Derek's mouth went dry. I may have triggered some security protocols during my research. Cadet Thompson, you need to understand that what you've stumbled onto is a matter of national security. I'm authorizing an immediate investigation, and federal agents will be arriving at Thunderbolt Academy within the next 6 hours. Until then, you are not to discuss this matter with anyone. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am. And Cadet Thompson, if your suspicions are correct, you may have prevented a serious security breach. But if you're wrong, quotes, the implied threat hung in the air. Let's hope you're right. The line went dead, leaving Derek staring at the phone with a mixture of vindication and terror. He'd set something in motion that couldn't be stopped, and he wasn't sure whether he'd just saved his country or destroyed his life. By 1400 hours, the black sedans had arrived. Derek watched from the barracks window as federal agents in dark suits emerged from their vehicles, moving with the purposeful efficiency of people who dealt with threats to national security on a regular basis. Agent Foster was a tall, sharp-eyed woman who looked like she could see through lies from across a room. Her partner, Agent Martinez, the irony of the name wasn't lost on. Derek was a former military man whose bearing suggested special operations. Background: the first sign that Derek's investigation had consequences came during afternoon classes. Marcus Webb simply wasn't there. His bunk was empty, his gear gone, as if he'd never existed. Where's Webb? Derek asked Lisa during a break between sessions. Lisa's face was pale. Got reassigned this morning. Some issue with his security clearance, apparently. Something about unreported foreign contacts in his family. Derek felt ice form in his stomach. Marcus had been asking questions about Sofia, and now he was gone. What kind of foreign contacts? Nobody saying. But Derek ... Lisa grabbed his arm, her voice dropping to a whisper. This morning, before Marcus disappeared, some guys in suits were asking me questions about what we discussed yesterday. About Martinez. What did you tell them? The truth. That we'd noticed unusual things about her technical knowledge. But Derek, I think we're in over our heads here. These aren't base security asking routine questions. These are federal agents, and they're treating this like a major security investigation. That evening, Derek found himself called to a conference room in the administration building. Agent Foster and Agent Martinez sat across from him, flanked by two other agents whose names weren't provided. A recording device sat in the center of the table, its red light blinking steadily. "Cadet Thompson," Agent Foster began, "we've completed our preliminary investigation into Sofia Martinez's background. What we found is concerning." Derek leaned forward, vindicated. "I knew something wasn't right about her." "The concern isn't about her," Agent Martinez said quietly. "It's about you." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" Agent Foster consulted her tablet. "Your unauthorized access to classified databases. Your attempts to investigate personnel with security clearances above your level. Your contact with outside military personnel regarding sensitive information, all of this constitutes a serious breach of security protocols." "But I was trying to expose a security risk, were you?" Agent Foster's voice was ice cold. "Or were you investigating a legitimate military operation that you had no business knowing about?" Derek's world tilted. "You're saying she really is ... I'm saying that your investigation has compromised ongoing operations and put lives at risk. The question now is whether this was malicious espionage or simply the actions of an overly curious cadet who doesn't understand the consequences of his actions." Derek stared at the agents, realizing with growing horror that he wasn't the whistleblower in this scenario, he was the security breach. His investigation hadn't exposed Sofia as a fraud. It had exposed her as exactly what she'd claimed to be, a classified operative whose cover he'd nearly blown. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Agent Foster's smile was thin and professional. "Now, Cadet Thompson, we determine whether you're salvageable or whether you represent a permanent security risk." The recording device continued to blink, capturing every word of Derek's slow realization that his pursuit of the truth had led him into a nightmare from which there might be no escape. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Colonel James Harrison had been expecting this conversation for 3 days. As base commander of Thunderbolt Academy, he'd received the priority communication from Washington that made his morning coffee taste like ash. Now watching Sofia Martinez walk across the tarmac toward his office at 0800 hours, he wondered if the young woman understood how close she'd come to having her cover blown by an overzealous cadet's curiosity. "Cadet Martinez," he said as she entered his office and snapped to attention. "Or should I say, Captain Rivera?" The use of her real name hit Sofia like a physical blow. After 3 years of careful anonymity, of building a civilian identity from scratch, someone had finally connected all the dots. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." Colonel Harrison removed his glasses and set them on his desk with deliberate precision. "Captain Sofia Phoenix Rivera. Distinguished Flying Cross. 2 Purple Hearts. Silver Star for actions during operation. Nightfall, classified mission over the Baltic states. March 2022. Sofia remained at attention, but Harrison could see the calculations running behind her eyes: escape routes, cover stories, damage assessment. "The mission reports make for fascinating reading," Harrison continued, opening a thick manila folder marked with classification stamps. "Especially the part about how you kept a damaged stealth reconnaissance aircraft airborne for 53 minutes after taking missile damage that should have brought it down immediately. The part about how you managed to extract 2 critically wounded intelligence operatives from behind enemy lines before your aircraft was destroyed. That mission is classified, sir. Which is why Captain Sofia Rivera died in that crash," Harrison said softly. "Full military honors, flag presentation to grieving parents who'd been told their daughter died serving her country. Except the coffin was empty, because sometimes the dead need to stay dead for operational security reasons." Sofia finally spoke, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "What do you want from me, Colonel?" Harrison gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Captain. We need to discuss why you're really here." As Sofia took the offered seat, Harrison pulled out another folder, this one marked with intelligence briefings and satellite imagery. 6 weeks ago, our intelligence services identified a chemical weapons facility operating in the disputed territories along the Romanian border. The facility is producing weapons-grade toxins that could kill thousands if they reach terrorist organizations operating in Western Europe. Sofia studied the satellite photos Harrison spread across his desk. Even in grayscale imagery, she could identify defensive positions, transport routes, and the telltale signatures of a hardened military installation. Why hasn't this been handled through normal diplomatic channels? Because the facility is being operated by a consortium with connections to 3 different intelligence services, 2 NATO allies, and at least 1 terrorist organization. Any official military response would create international incidents we can't afford. Harrison switched to another set of photos showing personnel in chemical protection suits. However, a private pilot conducting geological surveys in the region might be able to gather the intelligence we need to justify a precision strike. Sofia absorbed the implications. This wasn't just a reconnaissance mission, it was a black operation using a pilot who was already officially dead. If something went wrong, there would be no rescue, no official acknowledgement, no flag draped. Coffin. When do I leave? 72 hours. But first, we need to make sure you're still operationally capable after 3 years of civilian life. Harrison nodded toward the window, where Sofia could see an unusual aircraft parked away from the standard trainers. "That bird outside isn't just for evaluation, Captain. It's equipped with systems that will simulate the actual mission environment. Consider this your final exam." As they prepared to leave for the flight line, Harrison's expression grew serious. "There's another matter we need to address. Cadet Thompson's investigation has attracted federal attention. Agent Foster and her team are currently deciding whether he represents a security risk that needs to be neutralized." Sofia felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of neutralization? The permanent kind, unless we can convince them that. His curiosity was innocent and containable. Harrison met her gaze. "I'm told you spoke with Thompson in the hangar 2 nights ago. What's your assessment?" Sofia thought about Derek's determination, his genuine desire to protect what he saw as the integrity of the training program. "He's not malicious, just thorough and stubborn. Stubborn can be fatal in this business. Give me a chance to talk to him before the agents make their final decision. If I can convince him to back down completely, maybe they'll settle for reassignment instead of something more permanent." Harrison considered this. "You have 2 hours before your evaluation flight. After that, decisions will be made by people who don't share my preference for non-lethal solutions." As Sofia left Harrison's office, she could see Derek Thompson through the window of the interrogation room in the adjacent building. Federal agents surrounded him, their body language suggesting the interview wasn't going well. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he answered questions that would determine whether he lived or died. Sofia had warned him. She'd given him a chance to walk away, to forget what he'd discovered and live his life in ignorant safety. Instead, he'd chosen to dig deeper, to contact federal authorities who now viewed him as either a whistleblower or a spy. The irony wasn't lost on her. Derek Thompson had been so determined to expose what he thought was a fraud that he'd stumbled into a classified operation and become a security threat himself. His investigation had forced her hand, accelerated a timeline that should have remained flexible. In 72 hours, she would be flying into hostile territory with minimal support and maximum deniability. But first, she had to prove to Colonel Harrison and to herself that 3 years of hiding hadn't cost her the edge that had once made her the military's most effective ghost pilot. The aircraft waiting for her on the tarmac looked like it had been designed by someone who understood that stealth and lethality often wore the same face. As Sofia walked toward it, she wondered if the person she used to be would recognize the person she was becoming, or if Captain Phoenix Rivera had died in that Baltic crash after all, leaving behind only a shadow who wore her name and carried her memories. The evaluation flight would answer more than just questions about her flying ability. It would determine whether the dead pilot could truly rise from the ashes, or whether Sofia Martinez would have to disappear forever, taking Derek Thompson's fate with her. The aircraft designated Shadowhawk defied every conventional understanding of military aviation. Sofia circled it slowly on the tarmac, her trained eye cataloging details that shouldn't exist on any aircraft in the official inventory. The fuselage seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, its angular surfaces creating optical illusions that made it difficult to judge size and distance. No markings, no identification numbers, just a faint shimmer across the skin that suggested stealth. Technology several generations beyond anything publicly acknowledged. Experimental prototype, Colonel Harrison said, approaching across the empty section of runway where the aircraft had been positioned away from curious eyes. Officially, the program was canceled during the design phase due to budget constraints. Unofficially, 4 were built and assigned to operations that don't exist in any congressional briefing. Sofia ran her hand along the aircraft's wing, feeling the subtle texture that indicated advanced radar-absorbing materials. Specifications? Range: 1,400 nautical miles without refueling. Service ceiling: 68,000 feet. Electronic signature roughly equivalent to a large bird. Harrison handed her a helmet that matched the aircraft's unmarked aesthetic. More importantly, it's equipped with sensor packages that can detect chemical weapons signatures from 30 miles away. Sofia accepted the helmet and began her pre-flight inspection. Every system was state-of-the-art, every component designed for a mission profile that pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible. She'd flown experimental aircraft before, but nothing that felt this much like science fiction made real. If I encounter hostile forces, the aircraft is unarmed, Captain. Your only defenses are invisibility, speed, and the skills that kept you alive when officially you were already dead. Harrison's expression was grim. If you're detected, you're on your own. No backup, no extraction, no official acknowledgement that you were ever there. Sofia nodded, climbing into the cockpit. The interior was unlike any aircraft she'd flown. Displays that responded to eye movement, controls that adapted to her hand positions, systems that seemed to anticipate her needs before she expressed them. Weather report shows clear skies over the target area. Harrison continued through her headset. Your mission parameters are loaded into the navigation system. Consider this a rehearsal for the real thing, but understand that the threats you'll face today are every bit as deadly as what you'll encounter over Romania. Sofia's blood chilled. Today's mission is live. Intelligence indicates the chemical weapons facility is preparing to move their operation. We can't wait 72 hours for a perfect mission window. Your evaluation flight is now the actual mission, Captain. Success means preventing weapons-grade toxins from reaching terrorist organizations. Failure means thousands of innocent civilians die from attacks we could have prevented. Sofia stared at her instrument panel, processing the magnitude of what Harrison had just revealed. This wasn't a training exercise or an evaluation, it was the mission itself, disguised as a test to maintain operational security. Colonel, I need to ask about Derek Thompson. Harrison's voice crackled through the CUM system. Agent Foster has made her preliminary assessment. Thompson will be transferred to a desk job at a classified location where his curiosity can be monitored and contained. His military career is over, but he'll live. Relief flooded through Sofia, followed immediately by the weight of responsibility. Derek's fate had been decided, but thousands of other lives now depended on her ability to complete a mission she'd had no time to properly prepare for. "Shadowhawk, you are cleared for departure." The aircraft lifted off in near-perfect silence, climbing steeply into the Nevada desert sky. By the time the sun reached its zenith, Sofia was at 55,000 feet and crossing into international airspace. Invisible to radar and officially non-existent, the flight to the target coordinates took 4 hours. Sofia spent the time studying real-time intelligence feeds, weather patterns, and escape routes she hoped she wouldn't need. The mission was straightforward in concept, but terrifying in execution. Penetrate hostile airspace, gather definitive proof of chemical weapons production, and return with evidence that would justify whatever response Washington deemed necessary. At 13:47 hours, her sensors detected the facility. Through the Shadowhawk's advanced optics, Sofia could see a complex of hardened buildings surrounded by defensive positions that made her blood run cold. Surface-to-air missile batteries, radar installations, and enough armed personnel to repel a small army. The facility wasn't just producing chemical weapons. It was preparing for war. Sofia activated the recording systems and began a careful reconnaissance. Pattern, maintaining altitude and distance, while gathering the evidence that would seal the facility's fate. The intelligence was even worse than Harrison had indicated. This wasn't just a production facility, it was a storage and distribution center for weapons that could devastate major population centers. Then her threat warning system lit up like a Christmas tree. "Shadowhawk, you have multiple surface-to-air missile sites activating." Harrison's voice crackled through the satellite communication link. "Recommend immediate egress." Sofia's displays showed at least 6 missile batteries coming online, their targeting radars sweeping the sky in search. Patterns specifically designed to detect stealth aircraft. Someone had been expecting her. "Shadowhawk, you have missiles in the air. Multiple launches, incoming from your 6 o'clock position." Sofia pushed the aircraft into a dive, using gravity and the Shadowhawk's electronic warfare capabilities to break missile lock. The aircraft responded like a living thing, dancing through defensive maneuvers that would have been impossible in any conventional plane. But the missiles were sophisticated, designed specifically to counter stealth technology. One passed close enough that its proximity fuse activated, showering the aircraft with shrapnel that damaged her left wing and knocked out half her electrical systems. "Shadowhawk, what's your status?" "Aircraft damaged but flyable," Sofia reported, fighting to maintain control as warning lights cascaded across her displays. "Intelligence package is complete. Returning to base." "Negative, Shadowhawk. You have additional hostiles inbound. Fast movers, likely Russian-built interceptors." Sofia cursed under her breath. The mission had gone from reconnaissance to survival. In a matter of minutes, the Shadowhawk was fast and stealthy, but it was also damaged and unarmed. Against military interceptors, her only advantages were surprise and the skills that had kept her alive in situations that officially never happened. The chase that followed would determine whether Captain Phoenix Rivera truly had risen from the dead, or whether this time her luck had finally run out. The first interceptor appeared on Sofia's threat display at 14:02 hours, a MiG-29 climbing aggressively from a forward air base that intelligence had somehow missed. The pilot was good, using the terrain to mask his approach until he was within missile range. Sofia had perhaps 30 seconds before he achieved a firing solution. "Shadowhawk, you have bandits closing from multiple vectors." Colonel Harrison's voice crackled through the damaged communication system. "Count 3. No, 4 hostile aircraft converging on your position." Sofia dove toward the deck, using the Shadowhawk's damaged but still functional stealth systems to break radar lock. The aircraft groaned in protest, its compromised wing structure straining under G-forces that would have torn apart a conventional plane. Warning lights bathed the cockpit in red. But the engines still responded to her commands. The first missile launch came without warning, a cold warning, heat-seeking sidewinder variant that the Meg pilot had somehow acquired through black market channels. Sofia rolled inverted and pulled hard, using the sun's position to mask her heat signature, while deploying chaff and flares in a pattern designed to confuse the missile's guidance system. The missile detonated 200 meters behind her, close enough to rattle the airframe, but not close enough to bring her down. Sofia used the explosion's thermal bloom to mask her turn toward a mountain valley that might provide cover from the converging interceptors. Shadowhawk, additional bandits inbound from the north. You're running out of sky. Sofia checked her fuel gauge enough for maybe 40 minutes of combat maneuvering, but the damaged systems were consuming power at twice the normal rate. She needed to end this chase quickly or risk becoming a smoking crater in the Romanian countryside. The second interceptor, an F-16, that shouldn't have been in this airspace, came at her from the blind spot created by the mountain ridge. Its pilot was aggressive, closing to gun range instead of relying on missiles. Sofia recognized the tactic: capture, not kill. Someone wanted the Shadowhawk intact. Not happening, she muttered, pushing the throttles forward. The Shadowhawk's engines screamed in protest, but the aircraft leaped forward with acceleration that pressed Sofia back into her ejection seat. She pulled into a vertical climb that no conventional fighter could match, using the prototype's advanced thrust-to-weight ratio to literally climb away from the pursuing F-16. At 45,000 feet, Sofia rolled inverted and dove back toward the deck, positioning herself behind the F-16 as its pilot struggled to follow her impossible maneuver. For a moment, she had the advantage. If the Shadowhawk had been armed, the fight would have been over. Instead, she used the psychological advantage of her position to force the F-16 pilot into a defensive break that took him out of the immediate fight. 2 down, 2 to go. The third interceptor was the most dangerous, a Eurofighter Typhoon, flown by someone who understood the Shadowhawk's capabilities. Instead of trying to outturn or outclimb the stealth aircraft, the pilot positioned himself to cut off Sofia's escape routes, forcing her toward the fourth interceptor waiting in ambush. Sofia recognized the trap and smiled grimly. It was exactly the kind of coordinated attack she would have planned if their positions were reversed. The pilots hunting her were professionals, which meant they'd be thinking tactically rather than emotionally. She keyed her radio to an emergency frequency. Mayday, Mayday. This is civilian aircraft November 74 Alpha. I'm being attacked by unidentified military aircraft, requesting immediate assistance. The transmission was a lie, but it served its purpose. Within minutes, the airspace would be flooded with rescue aircraft, news helicopters, and international observers. The pilots hunting her couldn't risk being identified in such a public incident. The Eurofighter pilot recognized the gambit immediately, pushing his aircraft into a desperate attack run designed to bring down the Shadowhawk before help could arrive. Sofia waited until the last possible moment, then pulled into a climb so steep it should have stalled any conventional aircraft. The Shadowhawk didn't stall. Instead, it seemed to hang motionless in the air for a moment before pitching forward into a dive that brought Sofia behind the Eurofighter at point-blank range. If she'd had guns, the fight would have been over. Instead, she used her position to force the Eurofighter into terrain that no sane pilot would enter, a narrow canyon with walls so close together that any mistake would be fatal. The Eurofighter pilot was good, but not suicidal. He broke off the attack, climbing towards safer airspace. The fourth interceptor never made it to the fight. Sofia's Mayday call had triggered exactly the response she'd hoped for a flight of NATO interceptors, scrambling from a nearby base, their pilots confused but determined to investigate reports of combat in their airspace. Shadowhawk NATO fighters are approaching your position. Recommend you identify yourself before they decide you're hostile. Sofia checked her position. She was 30 miles from the Romanian border, flying in airspace that belonged to a NATO ally. The pursuing interceptors had broken off, unwilling to risk international incidents by continuing their attack. Control, this is Shadowhawk. Mission accomplished. Returning to base. Copy, Shadowhawk. What's your status? Sofia looked at her damaged displays, felt the vibration in the airframe that suggested structural damage, and calculated the fuel remaining for her flight home. Aircraft is flyable, but I'll need a straight-in approach. No missed approaches, no second chances. Understood. Emergency crews are standing by. The flight back to Thunderbolt Academy took 2 hours and every bit of skill Sofia had accumulated. In 15 years of military flying, the Shadowhawk held together through determination and engineering excellence, but when she finally touched down on the Nevada runway, it was with the knowledge that the aircraft would never fly again. Colonel Harrison and the emergency crew were waiting as Sofia shut down the engines and climbed out of the smoking aircraft. Her legs barely supported her weight, adrenaline giving way to exhaustion that went bone deep. Mission accomplished, Colonel. The intelligence you need is in the recording systems. Harrison nodded, but his expression was grim. The intelligence confirms our worst fears. The facility isn't just producing chemical weapons, they're preparing for mass distribution to terrorist cells across Europe. Sofia pulled off her helmet, her hair matted with sweat and her hands shaking from the after-effects of combat stress. How long before the strike? 12 hours. Surgical precision, minimal collateral damage. Harrison paused. The kind of operation that's only possible because someone was willing to fly into hostile territory and gather the intelligence that makes precision targeting feasible. As emergency crews swarmed over the damaged aircraft, Sofia looked back at the machine that had brought her home. The Shadowhawk would be stripped for parts, and its advanced systems would live on in other aircraft. But this particular bird would never fly again, too damaged to repair, too advanced to risk capture if it fell into the wrong hands. Like her, it had been designed for a single mission, and it accomplished exactly what it was built to do. The debriefing took place in a secure room 3 levels beneath Thunderbolt Academy's administration building. Sofia sat across from Colonel Harrison, Agent Foster, and 2 men in expensive suits whose names weren't provided, but whose clearance levels were obviously stratospheric. The recording equipment was more sophisticated than anything she'd seen outside of Pentagon briefing rooms. The intelligence you gathered confirms the scope of the threat, said the older of the 2 unnamed men, consulting a tablet filled with classified assessments. The chemical weapons facility was hours away from shipping weapons-grade toxins to terrorist cells in London, Paris, and Berlin. Your mission prevented what could have been the largest coordinated terrorist attack in European history. Sofia nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. What about Derek Thompson? Agent Foster answered. Cadet Thompson has been transferred to a desk position at Kirtland Air Force Base. His security clearance has been permanently downgraded, and he's signed comprehensive non-disclosure agreements that will be enforced for the rest of his life. He's alive? He's alive, Foster confirmed. Your recommendation that his actions were motivated by legitimate security concerns rather than malicious intent was taken into consideration. He'll spend the rest of his military career analyzing weather patterns and filing reports that no one will ever read. Sofia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Derek's curiosity had nearly gotten him killed, but his determination to protect what he saw as the integrity of the training program had ultimately saved him. He would live, even if his dreams of becoming a pilot were over. And the facility? Colonel Harrison spoke for the first time in an hour. Destroyed at 0347 this morning. Precision cruise missile strike. No civilian casualties. Complete destruction of all chemical weapons stockpiles and production equipment. The Romanian government will blame a gas leak explosion at what they'll claim was a legitimate chemical processing plant. The older man in the suit leaned forward. Captain Rivera, your actions prevented thousands of deaths and potentially saved the European Union from political collapse. The operation will never be officially acknowledged, but it ranks among the most successful intelligence missions of the past decade. Sofia understood the subtext. Captain Phoenix Rivera would never receive a medal, never be honored in a ceremony, never have her achievements celebrated in any official capacity. She would remain dead to the world, a ghost pilot whose greatest victories would be secrets she took to the grave. What happens now? Now you disappear again, Agent Foster said. New identity, new background, new life. The Sofia Martinez identity has been compromised by Thompson's investigation. We're recommending a complete reset. Sofia considered this. 3 years of building a civilian life, of trying to find peace in anonymity, had been destroyed by one cadet's determination to uncover the truth. She could start over again, create a new persona, try once more to find a place in the normal world. There is another option, the younger man in the suit said, speaking for the first time. Your performance on this mission demonstrates that retirement may be premature. There are other threats, other missions that require someone with your unique capabilities. You want me to stay active? We want to offer you the choice. Continue as a civilian with a new identity, or return to active duty in a capacity that doesn't officially exist. The choice is yours. Sofia looked around the room at the faces of people who dealt in secrets and shadows, who measured success in lives saved rather than recognition earned. She thought about Derek Thompson, now condemned to a life of meaningless paperwork because he'd stumbled into a truth too dangerous for him to handle. She thought about the thousands of people in London, Paris, and Berlin who would never know. How close they'd come to dying from weapons that now existed only as ash and radioactive debris. If I stay active, what kind of missions? Colonel Harrison opened another file. Similar to what you just completed. High-risk reconnaissance, intelligence, gathering in denied areas, operations that require someone who's already officially dead. You'd be based here at Thunderbolt, using the Academy as cover while conducting missions that don't exist. And if something goes wrong, then Captain Phoenix Rivera dies again, this time permanently. No backup, no rescue, no official acknowledgement that you were ever there. Sofia stood and walked to the small window that offered a view of the flight line. Outside, cadets were conducting training exercises, learning the basics of military aviation under the Nevada sun. They looked young and eager, filled with dreams of serving their country and earning recognition for their achievements. She had been like them once before classified missions and black operations had taught her that the most important victories were the ones that couldn't be celebrated. I have one condition, she said, turning back to face the room. Name it. No more training accidents. No more cadets getting mysteriously reassigned because they ask uncomfortable questions. If someone stumbles onto classified information, we deal with it through education and compartmentalization, not intimidation and exile. Agent Foster raised an eyebrow. You want to protect future Derek Thompsons? I want to make sure that good people don't get punished for trying to do the right thing, even when they don't understand the full picture. The men in suits exchanged glances, conducting a silent conversation that Sofia couldn't interpret. Finally, the older man nodded, agreed. You'll have input on how security breaches are handled at the academy level. Sofia returned to her seat. Then I accept. Captain Phoenix Rivera remains active, operating under whatever cover identity serves the mission. Colonel Harrison smiled for the first time since she'd known him. Welcome back to the world of the living dead, Captain. Your first assignment briefing is tomorrow at 0800. As the meeting concluded and the various officials filed out of the room, Agent Foster lingered behind. Rivera, why did you really choose to stay active? You could have disappeared completely, built a quiet life somewhere peaceful. Sofia considered the question. Because someone has to do the jobs that officially don't exist. Someone has to be willing to die repeatedly for their country, to sacrifice recognition for results. I tried retirement, Agent Foster. It didn't take. Foster nodded slowly. The dead pilot flies again. The dead pilot never stopped flying. She just needed to remember why. Outside, the sun was setting over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a training flight was returning to base, engines singing with the promise of future missions and challenges yet to come. Captain Sofia Phoenix Rivera watched them land and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new threats, new missions, new opportunities to serve in the shadows while others flew in the light. She was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, Thunderbolt Academy had returned to its routine rhythm of training future pilots, but those who looked carefully could spot the changes. The woman everyone had called Paper Wings was gone, officially transferred to an instructor position at a civilian flight school in Oregon. Her personnel file listed her performance as satisfactory but unsuitable for military aviation career track, a deliberate mediocrity that masked one of the most successful classified operations in recent military history. Derek Thompson sat at a meteorology station in New Mexico, analyzing weather patterns for aircraft he would never fly again. His security clearance remained permanently restricted, his access to classified information limited to atmospheric data that posed no threat to national security. But he was alive, which was more than many people who stumbled into classified operations could claim. On quiet nights, when the desert wind whistled through the prefabricated buildings of Kirtland Air Force Base, Derek would sometimes look up at the stars and wonder about the woman he'd tried so hard to expose. Had she really been the legendary pilot he'd glimpsed in those redacted documents? Was she still out there, flying missions that didn't exist, protecting people who would never know her name? He'd signed enough non-disclosure agreements to fill a small library, each one reinforcing the message that some secrets were too dangerous to share. His curiosity had been surgically removed along with his flight status, replaced by a resigned understanding that there were truths in the world that ordinary people weren't meant to know. Marcus Webb had fared worse. His reassignment had led to a discharge for undisclosed security violations, and he now worked as a civilian contractor maintaining aircraft he was no longer cleared to fly. The investigation into Sofia Martinez had claimed more casualties than anyone officially acknowledged. Lisa Park remained at Thunderbolt Academy, still working in aircraft maintenance, but with a new understanding of the delicate balance between curiosity and survival. She'd seen what happened to people who asked too many questions about the wrong subjects. Her work had become more careful, more circumspect, guided by an awareness that some aircraft carried secrets as dangerous as any weapon system. Captain Williams continued training cadets in basic flight procedures, but he developed a new appreciation for students who performed exactly at the level their backgrounds suggested they should. Excellence was still valued, but exceptional performance now triggered quiet evaluations that had nothing to do with flight skills and everything to do with operational security. Colonel Harrison had received a commendation for his role in preventing what intelligence analysts called the London event, a potential terrorist attack that had been thwarted through unspecified intelligence gathering operations. The citation was deliberately vague, but those who knew how to read between the lines understood that Thunderbolt Academy had played host to something significant and classified. In the months that followed Sofia's official departure, maintenance crews at airbases around the world began reporting strange occurrences. Aircraft that moved through night skies without transponder signals, landings that left no record in control tower logs, and the occasional sighting of a pilot whose face seemed familiar, but whose name appeared in no current personnel database. Ghost of Captain Phoenix Rivera continued to fly, carrying out missions that couldn't be acknowledged by the people who ordered them or celebrated by the people they protected. Intelligence agencies in hostile nations began reporting mysterious equipment failures, communication intercepts that yielded no useful information, and the frustrating sense that their most sensitive operations were being observed by someone they couldn't detect. A chemical weapons facility in Syria simply exploded one night, its destruction blamed on an industrial accident that left no survivors to contradict the official story. Terrorist communications in 3 different countries went silent simultaneously, their encrypted networks somehow compromised by intelligence gathering methods that remained classified beyond top secret. Sofia Martinez, the identity she'd worn at Thunderbolt Academy, vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. Official records showed her transfer to civilian aviation, but any attempt to trace her employment history beyond that point led to dead ends and missing files. The woman who had been Captain Phoenix Rivera continued to exist in the spaces between official records, a weapon so classified that even her survival was a state secret. She flew under different names, carried different documentation, but always served the same purpose: protecting a nation that could never acknowledge her sacrifice. Years later, when military historians tried to piece together the classified operations of the early 21st century, they would find gaps in the records. Missions that succeeded for reasons that couldn't be explained, threats that vanished without official intervention, aircraft that performed feats beyond the capability of any pilot who officially existed. They called it the Phoenix phenomenon, attributing it to experimental technology and advanced artificial intelligence. They never suspected that some of the most critical missions in American history had been flown by a pilot who had died officially but lived on in the shadows, protecting a world that could never know her name. The cadets at Thunderbolt Academy continued their training, unaware that their most remarkable classmate had become something more than human, a guardian angel who flew without recognition, fought without acknowledgement, and served without the expectation of anything beyond. The knowledge that her missions kept innocents safe from threats they would never know existed. In the end, that was enough. It had to be, because some stories are never meant to be told, only lived by those brave enough to disappear into legends that protect the world from its darkest possibilities. Sofia Rivera's story reminds us that the quietest person in the room might be carrying the heaviest secrets, and that true heroes often operate in shadows where recognition can never reach them. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in demanding respect, but in earning it through actions that speak louder than any words ever could. The paper wings had become real wings, carrying a legend through skies that officially didn't exist, protecting people who would never know how close they'd come to disaster. Captain Phoenix Rivera had learned to fly in the space between life and death, between official recognition and necessary anonymity. She was proof that some legends are too dangerous to celebrate, but too important to forget. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.